Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here for this session, which is the cash assistance for those in need, lesson learned in Poland. My name is Anna Cerutti. I'm the program manager for the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. And I'm in Poland since June 2022 to work together with the Polish Red Cross to the response to the refugee crisis in country. As panelists for this session, we have Barrie Hebb, economist from Canada. Barrie has 25 years of experience in the region, of which 7 working in cash and voucher assistance programs in the region as well in other parts of the world. Since March, he's been co-chairing the cash working group with the Polish humanitarian action. Hleb Salauyou is a humanitarian worker from Belarus. He covered the post as a cash and voucher assistant information manager for the Polish Red Cross. And he holds 12 publications on Ukraine and Belarus relations. Our third guest is then Michał Szachmat, sorry for my pronunciation. He's the project coordinator of the Association of Ukrainians in Poland, and is as well as a member of the Council of Ukrainian House in Przemyśl. His experience in cash and the organization he works with, he's actually a partner of the Polish humanitarian action. For this panel, Barrie will introduce us the cash and working assistance working group in terms of understanding how then it was organized at the beginning of the crisis, and how then the work of humanitarian actors was brought together to work in a collaborative manner. Hleb then will provide a concrete example on cash support to Ukrainian in Poland, as well as Michael, a more than focused support in Przemyśl. So I open the floor to Hleb. Thank you very much. To Barrie.
Oh, thank you very much. So if we can start the first presentation, if it's okay. Do I just press this or no? Oh, here we go. I prefer to stand because there will be a few numbers on the screen. I have to always try and bore people with some numbers. So I'd just like to introduce basically the big topic for this humanitarian response in Poland, and just to give some big picture idea about humanitarian response in general to make it more understandable. But basically, each year, millions of people around the world are affected negatively by disasters and crises. And those disasters can be natural disasters, such as earthquakes or floods, or they can be man-made disasters, such as conflicts, or they could also be like economic crises like collapse. Of all those people who are negatively affected each year by these crises or disasters, there's a certain number of people each year who don't have the resources to cope with the disaster. And these people fall within the scope of humanitarian assistance. And the reason for that, or the rationale behind it, is that many people who have income or insurance, or their government is actively available and ready, or the scale is very small, they won't fall into the sector of humanitarian response. But there will be millions of people who don't have income, they don't have the job, or their livelihoods are lost, they become unemployed, and they start to suffer and become severely deprived of basic essentials for life. So you can imagine somebody not having food or water, they don't have a job, they have children to care for, the electricity is off, and they lose the means to life. And this suffering and deprivation is one of the primary objectives of humanitarian emergency response assistance. And the objective is also to help them overcome negative coping. And what we mean by that with negative coping is that when people are affected by disaster, they don't have the means to cope with it. They can start being at the risk of exploitation. They can resort to things like prostitution. They could start skipping meals. We can think of a lot of simple things that people start to suffer from. They start to skip meals, or they start to deprive their children of food, trying to get over the disaster. So the primary reason why I start this conversation off with this is that humanitarian assistance is not meant to replace the government, and it's not meant to be a permanent solution. It's meant to simply help people in a crisis situation, in an emergency relief effort, to help them basically overcome severe deprivation and suffering, and it gives them life-saving emergency support. It's temporary. It's not meant to be long-term. And I hope I can get this slide to work properly. But basically in this response for Poland, thank you. Basically in this response for Poland, we talk about the cash response. And part of the reason I mentioned this as a broad opening introduction is that typically when people think of humanitarian assistance, they think of like food kits or doctors showing up. And that's usually what my family in Canada thought I did. They didn't know I was a doctor, and I'm not a doctor. I show up with cash response instead. But many people think of humanitarian assistance like that. And in this case in Poland, we used cash for part of the response. What I'd like to do is shed some light on the cash response to help make it a bit more understandable, but also some of the lessons we learned from cash in the Polish example from the refugee crisis. So just to give you some example, cash is being used as a form of assistance more widely globally. And since 2016, the amount has reached just over 6.3 billion, and it's probably even higher now. This is 2020 numbers. But this is roughly 1/5 to 1/3 of the emergency humanitarian assistance per year from global budgets. And so what's the global budget? Well, humanitarian assistance is usually about $16 to $20 billion a year for those people in need of humanitarian assistance. So that means targeting people who don't have the means to recover from an emergency, disaster, or crisis or conflict. And so it's roughly 1/3. It's probably going to continue to increase and become much more sophisticated over time. So it's quite important to discuss cash as the way that we assist people in need, but also what changes have to be made to make it even more effective to help those people overcome a disaster and recover and also help their families. No, this is the wrong way, sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to say a couple words about Polish humanitarian action, and there's a couple of reasons why I want to say this. So Polish Humanitarian Action is a humanitarian aid organization based from Poland, and my name doesn't sound very Polish, and there's a reason for that. But basically our aim is to provide people suffering from armed conflicts and natural disasters, and the mission is to make a world a better place by alleviating human suffering and promoting humanitarian values. And that's done by both humanitarian emergency assistance, and those are usually projects for 6 months or to a year, meant to be emergency, temporary assistance, but it also includes development assistance for people to recover and to alleviate poverty and certain conditions. And one of the reasons why I put this up on the slide for now is also a second reason, and that's that in many crises, people don't know what humanitarian organizations are. They don't know what to expect from them. And the second point here is really what we're not. We're not to replace governments. We're not there to replace the private sector. We're there to target specifically people who don't have the means to cover their own needs. And this will become a bit important for the lessons learned as well that I'd like to discuss today. And even though it looks simple, it's still quite complicated. Okay. I want to start off the conversation about the Polish response with the initial situation that we had. And I was based in Ukraine before February 2022. I came across the border just before the conflict escalated. And this is what it looked like on day 5, with hundreds of thousands of people crossing from Ukraine into Poland and other neighboring countries. At that point, Polish Humanitarian Action asked me to look at the situation and set up a potential cash response for those in need of assistance fleeing the conflict in Ukraine. At that time, there was very little information, so we just knew there were large numbers of people coming across. It's likely to grow and expand and scale up significantly, but also the context of Ukraine is very important to take into consideration. Over 60% of the Ukraine population has an income level that's basically in poverty. It's at the subsistence level of living. That's about $100 to $120 a month. And that means that there's probably a huge chance that a large number of people crossing the border will not have savings, will not have insurance, will not have the means to provide for themselves or their children when they cross the border and see these high prices in Europe, and they won't be able to cover their food, clothing, shelter, and they'll be at risk of severe deprivation and suffering, and that also leads other people to be at the risk of abuse, exploitation, and as I mentioned before, prostitution and things like this, which is a real problem during these types of crises globally. And so we set up this cash response knowing that this situation was going to be very severe and a very large scale. And basically the idea was that we want to provide people with some aid to help them avoid that basic life-threatening situation. So we can't give people enough money to provide for all their needs, but we can provide enough to at least help them avoid the worst worst case scenario conditions as best we can. So this is basically just a brief summary of some of the conditions that we sort of summarized at the very beginning of the crisis, which is basically the reason I would put this slide up is the following. The situation drives the quality of the response and the way to design and implement it. Different situations require different humanitarian responses. In this case, we have a huge number of people and likely to grow in scale to a very significant level. Also, we don't just have Ukrainian citizens fleeing the conflict in Ukraine. There were also lots of students from low-income countries who were there studying, for example. They crossed the border, they might have lost their documents, they might have left their third country nationals who leave, etc. So there's a bit of a complication with this. Population's highly mobile. And this is very important for humanitarian response for the reason that we want to give people cash because we don't know where they're going to end up. They might cross into Poland but not know where they're going to go, where they're going to settle. If we start giving people big food kits and boxes and utensils and all kinds of typical humanitarian equipment that normally you'd see in other countries, this wouldn't be appropriate for people who don't know where they're going to stay or go. Also, people had multiple emergency needs. So while the largest percentage of people were single women or single women-headed households with their children, some need Pampers, some need soap, some need shelter, some have people that will host them. There's a large number of different needs, so it's very difficult to go and purchase the appropriate things for everyone given the size of this type of crisis. Pressure on local capacities. Despite the generous intentions of people in Poland and the government to respond and help people in this crisis, we do know that despite all that, there's simply not enough resources to help everyone very quickly, and this opens a gap where humanitarian response becomes critical. Risk of failing to meet basic needs. This is the big part for us, for this cash working group and the cash response in Poland. There's a huge percentage of people coming across who won't be able to cover their basic food, clothing, shelter, and non-food item needs like beds, sheets, blankets, clothing, things like that. So there's a lot of people who are at risk of suffering severe deprivation and negative strategies to cope with that. And the last thing was that the situation was likely to change. So back in that late February period, when I was asked to sort of look at this situation, we knew that there were many unknowns, and we want to respond as quickly as possible so that people don't have to wait too long to get their assistance. Sorry, time? No, okay, sorry, I can speak for too long, so I'll skip this slide, then maybe we know that the situation is quite large scale. So this is really one of the main points that start off with cash assistance and all humanitarian assistance, in fact, is that there simply is enough money to help everyone. Each year, the number is about 200 million people are in need globally of humanitarian assistance, so they don't have the resources to cover themselves. I think it's here about 200, well, it's roughly 216, 220 million. There's only about 18 billion US dollars a year providing humanitarian assistance. And this unfortunately works out to be about $83 per person per year, all costs in globally. So what this means is that there's a very tight budget for humanitarian assistance, and very difficult decisions have to be made about who to help and how much. It also means that we have to exclude people, unfortunately, who are not as severely in need. So this is the main question here. Why did we decide to do cash? We decided to do cash for several reasons. One was that the population was very mobile, so cash is very flexible. It's also very fast. It can be. It can also be slow if it's not done well. But it should be rapid. It can be flexible. It also gives people who are in need with dignity and respect because they can choose for themselves what makes sense for themselves and their families, and they can take it with them and they can move around. And it also provides support for local markets. Rather than buy millions of dollars worth of things in other countries and ship it into Poland, it would potentially provide support for the Polish local economy. How much assistance do we provide in Poland for people to meet their basic needs? We did a very rough calculation at the very beginning of the crisis, and we decided that we provide 3 months of assistance for people severely in need. The first member of the household would get 710 zloty per month for the 3 months. Each additional member would get 610, excluding like excess fees for bank cards and things like that. And for winter, we decided on 1,000 Polish zloty per person for a 6-month period, up to 3 people per household maximum. And these were meant to provide temporary assistance for those in need while there's transition to like government response to actually cover people in the longer term. The Poland Cash Working Group was set up by Polish Humanitarian Action and UHCR back in March to co-chair it, and this was to coordinate the cash response to make it more efficient and effective. And to date, there's about 144 people registered in the cash working group. They don't all show up to all meetings, but it represents about 58 different organizations, and some are the same organization but different branches, so it's not a completely independent agencies. And there are more than 2 different working groups for deduplication and other sub-themes within the cash working group. To date, 784,000 people have been reached by cash assistance. This is still ongoing, so about half of them have gotten all 3 months of assistance so far, and the other remaining part have been enrolled but not yet completed. And this is about 153 million zloty so far. So if you work that out, that will not work out to the full amount that everyone's gotten. That's because there's still ongoing distributions from these numbers. And I'll end there. I think I took a few more minutes extra, and I apologize for that, but well, I skipped some numbers as well. So basically the question here would be, what do we learn from this response so far? And I would like to hand back the floor to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Barrie. So I pass the microphone for, without wasting any time. Get a big applause, then we will have time for asking some questions later on. So I pass the microphone to Hleb. So the Polish Red Cross is one of the organizations which is part of the cash working group. And Hleb will present the achievement that were made so far, and as well as the methodology for the Polish Red Cross, and together with the IFRC in the implementation of this activity. Please, Hleb.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Barrie, for this overview of Cash Working Group, because Polish Red Cross and IFRC also participating in Cash Working Group in order to... Can you please turn on slide? Should be... Yeah, IFRC PCK presentation.
It was a combined one?
Oh, so it's probably...
Yeah, I do believe after this one.
A few more slides.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you so much. In April 2022, PCK with huge support from IFRC side started and launched its own cash program, multi-purpose cash program, with also shelter and integrated assistance program and mental health and psychological support, where multi-purpose cash is one of the main aspects of our work in this response. As Barrie mentioned, the refugees are going around, right? And they don't even settle in one particular city. And we want to support as many people as possible, reach as many vulnerable people who are in needs as possible. So that's why we decided to, firstly, to implement this in Warsaw. But after a couple of months, we understood that we have to go in other directions to reach other people in needs. And we prepared the map of humanitarian response, where we can see the cash assistance that was implemented by other humanitarian actors in different locations. And after that, we decided to launch our program in Łódź and Bydgoszcz. Why? Because we would like to avoid duplications and avoid families to receive the assistance twice and to reach more families and leverage Red Cross countrywide presence by intervening in locations not served by other actors, as well as support also Polish Red Cross branches in other cities. And we, of course, after Łódź and Bydgoszcz, after learned lessons, we also want to expand our program further next year. Basically, which criteria we used in order to provide our cash support. The beneficiaries are divided into households, and they're supposed to leave Ukraine after 21st of February, when the conflict escalated. They supposed not to receive financial assistance from other humanitarian organizations. That's the point that I already mentioned. Single-headed household with at least one dependent. It can be the minor or it can be the elderly. or it can be also the elderly harried household, or household who has 2 or more dependent people, or have some specific needs and disabilities. So basically, one focal point of household can register all other family members inside this household with the application that I'm going to go through in a couple of minutes, and register its household. Why we use households instead of family? Because sometimes people can register together, for example, the mother of husband, because husband couldn't arrive to Poland on the understandable reasons. So his mother or father can be the part of the household and receive assistance altogether. Achievements so far that we done. So in total, Polish Red Cross and I4C assisted and registered 18,861 households, which means 45,589 individuals in 3 locations in Warsaw, Łódź, and Bydgoszcz. So firstly, we started to do in-person registrations in Warsaw, as you can see on the picture. I hope, yeah, it's visible for you. We invited a lot of volunteers, staff, and firstly, we did this in-person registrations, and we issued specifically prepared visa cards for households. So basically, they receive Visa card that top-ups each month in order to receive 4 transactions totally, and after that the beneficiaries could pick it up. But after lessons learned, after April and May, we decided to move on further and develop the self-registration application that can allow us to reach more people, to help more, and doesn't request so many resources as in-person registrations. And as example, in-personally, we issued, for example, 850 cards, more cards, but 850 households for 2 months. But from July to September, with self-registration app and with MoneyGram payments, we reached 18,000 households, which is totally different amount, and we kind of proud to say that with this registration app and with changing payment modality from Visa to MoneyGram, we reached more families. And let's go through this app right now and then cover the modalities and why we went from Visa to MoneyGram. So basically, you can install the app in Android or iPhone, and it calls Pitrimka, as you could see at the bottom of that slide. And firstly, it asks for your consent if you allow to your camera and location check, because we supported families, as far as I already mentioned, in Łódź and Bydgoszcz. So people from different locations, they couldn't apply. It's kind of impossible to reach everybody because in other locations also other humanitarian actors also launch their programs. So you have to be in Łódź or Bydgoszcz in the time when registration is open, and it checks your location. And also, it doesn't allow you to use VPN. But for example, if you're from Szczecin or Rzeszów and you arrive to Łódź or Bydgoszcz in the time when registration was open, you can also apply. Then also you need to register your household. Of course, you will start from the focal point, and they need to upload the documents. So far, we support the documentations such as international passport, the Ukrainian international passport, the Ukrainian plastic ID card, also old book passports. I hope you know that they stopped to be in use issued in the 90s, but still when the conflict escalated, a lot of families crossed the border with old book passports, and of course we allow them to apply with the documentation. Also birth certificates for children until 18 years old. So we take the data, we ask people to upload the picture of the document as well as make a selfie with this document in order to cross-check and verify that this individual is really this individual. And application understands quite well the picture in the passport with facial recognition. And after all the verification checks, of course, before that, people consent that they give their consent for data sharing. We make the communication channel with them in Viber, WhatsApp, SMS, because Viber is the most used social network for Ukrainian refugees. WhatsApp, if they prioritize this communication channel, and SMS for people who don't use messengers and do not have smartphones, they can still receive the MoneyGram code afterwards. So with this method, we do not need in-person registration if people have smartphones, but still we keep the this method of registration for people that cannot register by themselves, so they can come to local branches of Bydgoszcz, Cerutti, and other locations, and our local staff and volunteers could help with registration. And we don't need the in-person registration to issue Visa cards. So after registration approved, beneficiaries receive the message that your application was approved and receive the MoneyGram code. That after that, they can use in different MoneyGram locations. Like, for example, Poczta Polska. The post office, the Polish post offices are the main actors that involved in MoneyGram activities. They have constant money, and we can say from our perspective that we never had a problem with liquidity if many people come to MoneyGram locations and started to pick up money. So it's well organized, and what beneficiaries need to have their governmentally issued ID with photography and MoneyGram code that they received from us. And then they receive money in cash. So it's fast, rapid, and doesn't cause a lot of problems, as for example, with Visa ATMs withdrawals and different commissions from different banks. So there is no commission, people receive money. But why before that I mentioned old book passport on the last slide? The huge problem is when a beneficiary with old book passport arrives to Poczta Polska, so personal factor works. Personal factor of the MoneyGram agent, because in old book passport they do not have their names and surnames and even the document number in Latin characters. So some of the MoneyGram agency, they just cannot verify that this is a person who received the code, because they cannot read the Cyrillic characters in the names. So specifically for these beneficiaries that have issues in withdrawing money in MoneyGram locations, we issued the other method to send the MoneyGram codes directly to them, and they can apply these codes in their banking applications. After research made, we understood that so far 4 Ukrainian banks support MoneyGram option as a payment option, a private bank, monobank, Oshad Bank, and a bank. And we sent also the instructions for beneficiaries how to do so. And they can, if they have problems in withdrawing money in MoneyGram location, then can we change their payment method and send them MoneyGram code for digital pickup in one of these 4 banks. When beneficiaries have a lot of problems, we have also contact center that operates from Monday to Friday from 9 to 17 and support Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, English speakers, because not only Ukrainian refugees are from Ukraine and not only Ukrainian refugees are affected by ongoing conflict. So that's why we keep the possibility for people who speak in English or Polish or Russian to get assistance as well and get the response from our colleague from contact center. And we have also the web page Ukrainian Finance Assistance I4C that operates 24/7 and have all the latest updates. So in lessons learned, we understood that the majority of the beneficiaries, they preferred cash over in-kind distribution, and because they are independent in their decision, they know what they need to buy first, and the majority of them were satisfied with the mobile application that we launched. Here you can see the percentage on what beneficiaries, according to our PDM report that we did, post-distribution monitoring report that we did in Bydgoszcz after registrations, they spent. The majority they spent to cover their basic needs, and they stated that actually our assistance is the main source of their income so far. You can ask also if we have digital response, maybe how can we support also elderly participants? So preparing your question, we also have the answer that we don't exclude beneficiaries who are 50 plus or 60 plus years old because they still have the option to come to local branch and get support in registration. And also people are registering in households. So we have the plenty of example when the household, the daughter or granddaughter and grandchildren, they can support the elderly, the senior beneficiaries in order to reach and get this assistance together in one household. Yes, and right now I give the floor back to Anna. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hleb. We'll try later on then to download the app and to see if the geofencing is open here in Rzeszów or not. Before we finalize with Michał, who will present his experience in the cash programming here in this district. Please.
Dzień dobry. Ja nazywam się Michał Szachmat, reprezentuję Związek Ukraińców w Polsce, oddział w Przemyślu, który kieruje pracą Domu Ukraińskiego. Głównie zajmujemy się jako organizacja działaniami kulturowymi na rzecz mniejszości ukraińskiej w Polsce, jednak od 24, a nawet jeszcze lutego, a nawet jeszcze troszeczkę wcześniej zaczęliśmy myśleć, jak pomóc Ukraińcom w razie wybuchu wojny. Niestety ta wojna wybuchła i musieliśmy podjąć działania w strefie przygranicznej, między innymi na granicy, na przejściu granicznym w Medyce oraz w Przemyślu na dworcu kolejowym i stworzeniem shelteru, punktu noclegowego w Domu Ukraińskim w Przemyślu. Staramy się odpowiadać na wszystkie potrzeby osób uchodźczych. I dzięki wsparciu Polskiej Akcji Humanitarnej mogliśmy pomóc osobom uchodźczym w zdobyciu niezbędnych środków finansowych na życie, na przetrwanie tak naprawdę. Wiele osób, które zostały zarejestrowane w ramach programu TERA, który koordynowaliśmy u siebie w Przemyślu, a również jako związek w 3 innych miastach w Polsce. Jest to Stargard, Koszalin oraz Olsztyn. Nie miało niezbędnych środków do życia. Kwoty, o których wspomniał Barrie właśnie, czyli 710 zł oraz ponad 600 zł na każdą następną osobę, pomogły w ciągu 3 miesięcy, trzymiesięczna pomoc około 25 000 osób, z czego około 14 000, przepraszam, nie osób, tylko beneficjentów, czyli tyle było wydanych kart, z czego około 15 000 były to karty wydane w samym Przemyślu. Proces logistyczny wydawania kart wydawał się na samym początku nam bardzo prosty. Jednak spotkaliśmy kilka trudności związanych z samą dystrybucją. Na samym początku, wbrew pozorom, osoby uchodźcze bały się brać udział w programie, nie miały do końca zaufania, podając swoje wszystkie dane osobowe, otrzymywały w zamian kartę Sodexo, z którą wiedziały, co zrobić, chociaż nie miały pewności, czy na pewno te środki wpłyną. Na nasze szczęście w Domu Ukraińskim w tym samym czasie powstał konsulat honorowy Ukrainy, do którego przyjeżdżali konsulowie i z Krakowa, i z Lublina. Także on tak już nawet pełnił funkcję pełnowartościowego konsulatu i te osoby mogły u zaufanego źródła, czyli od konsula, który jest przedstawicielem danego kraju, przedstawicielem dyplomatycznym Ukrainy, otrzymać informację, że to jest sprawdzona pomoc i śmiało można z niej korzystać. Można powiedzieć, że nie trzeba było długo reklamować czy robić promocji akcji dystrybucyjnej, bo osoby uchodźcze między sobą bardzo często wymieniały się informacją. Że tak jak na początku mieliśmy problem i za mało osób chętnych do udziału w programie, tak z dnia na dzień tych osób było coraz więcej i kolejka pod naszym Domem Ukraińskim stawała się coraz większa, sięgała do kilkudziesięciu osób, których nie byliśmy w stanie obsłużyć takiej ilości w ciągu jednego dnia. Dlatego musieliśmy stworzyć systemy kolejkowe. Na początku karteczki z datą rezerwacji, później uruchomiliśmy własną infolinię, na którą osoby musiały się dodzwonić, żeby zarejestrować się do kolejki. Jednak liczba osób chcących wziąć udział w programie była tak duża, że to były tysiące, uwierzcie Państwo, tysiące połączeń telefonicznych dziennie. Dodzwonienie się na infolinię graniczyło z cudem. Bardzo często osoby płakały do telefonu, że udało im się dodzwonić. No i jednocześnie wtedy zdecydowaliśmy wspólnie z Polską Akcją Humanitarną i wsparciu Orange o uruchomieniu bezpłatnej infolinii, która miała kolejkomat, czyli dzwoniąc osoba słyszała: jesteś setny w kolejce na przykład. Pozwoliło to troszeczkę wyrównać szanse na udział w programie wszystkich osób. Jednak długi okres oczekiwania na połączenie myślę, że też zniechęcił dosyć dużo osób. Trzeba było być wytrwałym i na początku niestety ta infolinia była płatna i następnym krokiem było stworzenie bezpłatnej infolinii, czyli nie było ograniczenia, że udział w programie mogły wziąć osoby tylko te, które miały środki pieniężne na swoim koncie, na swoim telefonie. Wtedy już mógł każdy wziąć udział i tak naprawdę to był najbardziej sprawiedliwy dostęp, jaki mogliśmy wypracować w tamtym czasie. Dziennie nasza organizacja w samym Przemyślu rejestrowała od 100 do 150 osób, a telefonów, jak już wspomniałem, mieliśmy po kilkanaście tysięcy dziennie. Osób, które próbowały się dodzwonić, tak? Czyli to połączeń przychodzących, ale też nie byliśmy w stanie tego wszystkiego obsłużyć. To pokazuje skalę, jak bardzo potrzebny jest to program i jak warto go też kontynuować. W naszym odczuciu jako Związku Ukraińców w Polsce ta pomoc finansowa przede wszystkim daje takie poczucie godności i swobody wyboru. Jest to też odpowiedzią na pewne na standardy humanitarne. To poczucie wyboru, jak mogę wykorzystać te środki, bo nie każdy uchodźca potrzebuje w danym momencie spodni, nie każdy uchodźca potrzebuje w danym momencie wyżywienia. bo te środki można było wykorzystać na opłatę na przykład mieszkania, które też nie jest bardzo dostępnym, jest tak naprawdę dzisiaj na rynku, przynajmniej w Przemyślu, bo też staramy się wynajmować, jest bardzo ciężko znaleźć mieszkania pod wynajem dla osób uchodźczych. A my, i to jest w przypadku, kiedy my jako organizacja chcemy wynająć dla osób uchodźczych, a w przypadku, kiedy sam uchodźca sobie, czyli ten poziom niestety do osoby uchodźczej z Ukrainy, poziom zaufania do osoby uchodźczej z Ukrainy jest niższy niż do organizacji zarejestrowanej w Polsce, ma jeszcze większe problemy. I albo te osoby spotykają się z odmową, albo z o wiele wyższą ceną za wynajem lub wpłatą kaucji. Dlatego uważamy, że to pomoc finansowa, karty Sodexo, z których korzystała Polska Akcja Humanitarna, z których można było wypłacić gotówkę, były jednym z lepszych rozwiązań. No, wielkim plusem tego rozwiązania jest również łatwość w logistyce, tak, tych kart, bo potrzebowaliśmy tak naprawdę do ich dystrybucji od 3 do 5 osób w samym Przemyślu, żeby pomóc 15 000 osób, czy beneficjentów, gospodarstwom domowym, o których mówił kolega z Czerwonego Krzyża. I potrzebowaliśmy tylko tych 5 etatów, żeby pomóc tak ogromnej liczbie osób. Jednak zauważyliśmy też potrzebę, kiedy to nasi dystrybutorzy zaczęli bardzo dużo opowiadać o sytuacjach rodzinnych osób, którym udzielali, czy którym dawali te karty, których rejestrowali. Zauważyliśmy, że zaczynają bardzo mocno przeżywać osobne sytuacje rodzinne, bo każda rodzina, każdy beneficjent to jest osobna historia z osobnym przeżyciem, z osobną traumą wojenną. Także na przyszłość lekcję mamy również taką, że dystrybutorzy tych kart to nie są tylko pracownicy, to też są ludzie, którzy przeżywają i oni na przykład potrzebują też pomocy psychologicznej, dostępu do pomocy psychologicznej, którą na szczęście byliśmy w stanie im też świadczyć. Mieli ten dostęp, wskutek czego też nie musieli aż tak mieli komu się wygadać. Tak mówiąc kolokwialnie, mieli osobę, z którą mogą porozmawiać na ten temat. My jednak jako koordynatorzy nie jesteśmy wykwalifikowanymi osobami do udzielania pomocy psychologicznej. Dostęp do psychologa w sytuacjach tak kryzysowych, przy takiej ilości historii, traumatycznych historii, które te osoby otrzymywały od osób uchodźczych, no, była bardzo duża. Chciałbym jednak podkreślić, że pieniądze to nie wszystko i bardzo ważnym jest, żeby organizacje humanitarne włączały się również w aktywizację osób uchodźczych, bo środki finansowe, one oczywiście są niezbędne do życia, ale niezbędne do życia jest również niezbędną do życia jest również rozmowa z inną osobą lub jej aktywizacja poprzez na przykład kursy językowe, poprzez zajęcia artystyczne, które włączają nie tylko osoby z Ukrainy, osoby uchodźcze, ale tak samo osoby zamieszkujące w danym regionie. My jako Dom Ukraiński prowadzimy i lekcje językowe, i właśnie śpiew, lekcje gry na skrzypcach, na które przychodzą i osoby uchodźcze, i lokalsi tak zwani, ale również zajęcia gimnastyczne, bo nie wszystko, co pomoc może być świadczona nie tylko psychologicznie, ale również ruchowo i te osoby bardzo często tego ruchu potrzebują. Jeżeli będą pytania, to ja jak najbardziej z chęcią odpowiem. Póki co, dziękuję.
Thank you a lot. I know it was a lot, but was discussed in only 45 minutes, but we still have 5 in case there is any particular question that you would like to ask to the, please.
Bardzo miłe. Natomiast mam pytanie odnośnie PAH-u i PCK. Znaczy PCK, jaka wartość była sumy, która była przekazywana na kartę? To jest pierwsze pytanie. I pytanie uniwersalne do PAH i do PCK. Czy macie Państwo jakąś możliwość monitorowania, w jaki sposób te środki były wydawane? Gdzie, na co, w jaki sposób? Dziękuję.
Okay, so the 710, 610 calculation was from us, and so I was involved in that calculation. So basically we took from the Ministry of Social Policy of Poland the basic subsistence amount per month per person in Poland. The data, unfortunately, in March 2022 was from 2020, so it wasn't really our fault. But we took that basic subsistence amount for basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, non-food items, and we added to that inflation, and we got the basic amount of 710 for the first person and 610 for each other member of household. We decided to recommend for 3 months because this was supposed to be a transitional, temporary relief until people would register on PESEL and get money from the government through social protection. And so that's the answer for the first question about the amount, and that's how it was calculated. We've re-examined the amount. It hasn't changed for the rest of the year, despite inflation for basic amounts. It's very little, but also please bear in mind that it's not designed to help everyone with everything. Humanitarian assistance, like every other crisis, is extremely limited, and we have to target very severe, life-saving, emergency, temporary relief. The second question is that most organizations are obligated to do post-distribution monitoring, and so we ask people how they spent the money. If you ask a large enough pool of people, it's very difficult for them all to lie in the same way at the same time. So you get reasonably good data, but we also have evidence from the transactions from the cards that show us how it was used and how it was spent. So we do have that. I do have a slide if we can put I can show you what we have, if you can put the slide back up. Thank you. So I did prepare the slide just in case somebody asked that question, so thank you. Can we have the presentation back? Oh, thank you. So, and maybe while I'm bringing the slide up, you can speak as well. Oh, it's not there. I don't know. Okay. We did have the numbers aren't there. I put the slide on. Anyway, we have the Sodexo numbers that show us how the money was used across different vendors, et cetera. And we can tell that people use it generally for their basic needs. And then we have the PDM response where we interviewed people, and over 90% said they were able to meet their basic or at least most of their basic needs with the money we provided. So that's how we test it and we ask people.
So yeah, and basically from the PCK side, we also use the same amount because we agreed in cash working group that this amount will be used. So 700 zlotys for the head of the household and 600 zlotys for additional members of the household to be fair and avoid this disruption among different organizations, that someone gives 1,000, someone gives 600, and to be transparent in this order. And again, as Barrie already mentioned and I already mentioned, this is a multi-purpose cash, and the beauty of this assistance is that it gives independence to people, and people can decide by their own to which needs they must spend. And we did the post-distribution monitoring, and we asked to share with their experience, where did you share, where do you spend the money, because we assume that people in need, they also spend the received assistance to cover their needs. And here you can see the numbers.
If I could just add maybe one of the big lessons learned from this response, since we're talking about lessons learned. It's a major concern whenever you give out cash distributions to people in emergency responses. The evidence globally to date is that most people, most of the time, use it to feed their children, buy clothing, non-food items. But also, anytime you give humanitarian assistance, there's always a risk that people don't use it properly. If you give people like food kits, rice packs, they can take it to the market and sell it, get the cash and do something else anyway. So we really shouldn't think of cash as something really strange. We should think of in-kind physical assistance as basically inconvenient cash, because people have to trade it and then get the money to do something else. Cash is given by humanitarian standards unconditionally, in this case, so people have the freedom to spend it as they wish, and that does come with the risk that some percentage might misuse it, but that's the case with any gift. But sorry, thanks.
Thank you very much. So the time is over, but maybe we can pick another one.
Thank you. I'm from Ukraine. My name is Nadia. I represent Ukrainian organization Right to Protection, and we enroll in Ukraine 600,000 people on cash assistance, and we have many reflections on this program for Ukraine, and it's interesting to compare what your reflection on partnership cooperation in Poland and what your reflection on the duplication process in Poland, because in Ukraine we have big challenges with this, especially at the beginning, and coordination among different partners, among government and so on. And I will be grateful if you share your experience with this. And other kind of question, do cash assistance have a future in Poland in next stage? And what plan of your organization? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I might answer as well, because I'm part of the program. So in terms of duplication, well, the first is the participation of all actors intervening in cash, in the cash working group. So by sharing information, so is the first step, not to duplicate the support to people. As mentioned, I mean, the amount is not very high. So it's not the end of the day if you cover two organizations support the same family, the same households. But it means that like one other family will be left out if you support 2 times 1. So that's the reason why taking part in the cash working group and then like sharing all the data and so on is so important. In terms of data sharing, in the particular case, for instance, for Polish Red Cross in the IFRC and then UNHCR, which is this other bigger actors in Poland for cash and voucher assistance, there was signed an MOU for the data sharing agreement. That means that there is a deduplication between the organization. So people who are registered either by the UNHCR and partners receiving funds from UNHCR or by Polish Red Cross and the IFRC, then they are removed either on the list of one actor or the other. This unfortunately doesn't come as at the same time, so we are not moving at the same pace and time in terms of registration and disbursement. What happens is that if families receive, for instance, already 1 installment, then they are removed. A message is sent explaining that they couldn't have registered 2 times. So cases still happen, but then what we are doing is really trying to minimize. In a way, as Hleb was explaining before, is minimizing is also like working on the map. And then whenever we decide to move in a specific region is then to check once more with the actors which are in that region if there is any actor where they have, when they are implementing their program. I don't know if colleagues would like to add something more.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's one of the ones that donors ask every single time that I get asked to respond about the cash. And the big reason is there's just not enough money to help everybody. It's a very small amount of a budget, and there's many more people in need. And we have to make very targeted decisions. Who do we assist? Who do we don't assist? And every time, as Anna mentioned, if we help one family with 2 grants, that means not helping another family with 1 of the grants. So it's a very difficult solution. But there's several steps to the solution. One is coordination, like through the cash working group, that we actually pick out at the beginning of the response who's working where, so we can try to at least avoid in a softer way overlapping. With a high mobile population, like in this refugee crisis, that's become extremely difficult. People could get cash assistance in Ukraine, come across the border, get it in Poland, go to Slovakia, get it again. That's very true. And probably the other lesson I would stress about this is communications, and it comes back to a point Michał raised, the trust amongst the population. A lot of people don't understand what cash is for, and we unfortunately call it cash assistance, and it really upsets me every time, and I'm sure people are tired of me saying it. It's humanitarian assistance. It's not cash assistance. It's humanitarian assistance to help people avoid suffering and deprivation and avoid negative coping with the crisis. We just give them cash it's because it's convenient, instead of going and booking hotels and booking apartments and buying people food they might not want, etc. It's just more efficient, more effective. So we just use cash as the way we help people. And one of the reasons I stress this is that the population understands generally food assistance. Hungry people who are starving get food assistance. But if you ask me, I would like to have more cash as well. So everyone's cash deprived. So we have to always go back and stress cash as humanitarian assistance and explain to the population what it's for, what the purpose is, who it's intended for. And this helps build the trust and understanding because we get complaints all the time that people say, well, they got a grant and I didn't. Well, you have a car and a bank account and you're not really severely needy, you have a job, but this person has nothing. And once we explain what it's supposed to be designed for, it helps in a soft way do duplication. We have had people avoid applying once they understand what it's about. I've experienced this as well in the Red Cross emergency responses in the Caribbean, where people came in and they said they had 6 houses and they would like 6 shelter grants for repairs. And once they understood it was limited for people suffering, they decided not to apply at all. And so I think if we did the better trust, better communication, better engagement over time, cash will become more acceptable as the way we assist people, trust will improve, and deduplication will go down because people will not want to take from others.
Just quickly at some point about the duplication and digital part of the response, which from PCK perspective, from Polish Red Cross and I4C perspective, I find the most important lesson learned that we must invest in digitalization because it can reach a lot of people. And when people apply using our application, the application is smart, the technology is smart, and it can also understand that people applied in Slovakia, in Hungary, in Romania, in other countries affected, where the beneficiaries are, and automatically show us that this person already applied. Of course, I mean within one organization. With other organization, Anna already mentioned the I4C UNHCR side. And about future of cash program in Poland, well, we hope so. And right now we enlarge our capacities. We hire more people. We teach more people. We have a lot of learning experience with different national societies that have domestic cash programs. And we hope that it has a future in Poland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we don't want to monopolize further the stage. We have to leave. That's very good. But we can continue discussion offline. So we will be around. So happy to answer any other question that you have. And thank you very much for your participation and attention.